Okay, so once you've finished creating the text like we have here, we'll now need to start rigging it. Now, normally in rigging, as some of you have done rigging before, you add bones and then you apply it to the mesh. But just so that we keep because of our topology, we don't really want to do that, and also it's easier, we're going to be using something called a lattice. So a lattice, which if you do Shift A, you can find it here. And essentially what a lattice does is, depending on the points on it, if you have an object inside, these points will deform that object. So for our text object here, we want our lattice to surround it. So we'll do that now. And we'll just have the lattice go around the edges like this. You don't want the mesh to be outside of it, but you don't have to be super precise. Like, I'm going to leave some space just in case. So up here as well, we'll just do this to make it easier. There you go. Make sure your side is good. So yeah, something like this will work. And I prefer to keep it along the baseline just so it's easy to manage. So as an example of how lattices work, I will select the text, select lattice, and we'll do lattice deform. So if I select one of these points, you'll see that depending on how that point moves, the areas nearby on the text will also move. We'll just undo that. The issue is though, we only have 4 points right now, which is not very useful. Like, you can squash it, and that's about it. So what we're going to do is, here in the lattice options, we're going to increase these values. So I would say 3 on the V, so like a thickness of 3 points. And I found using an odd number like 15 works well. And for resolution, you want to make it square, so we'll do something like 8. That looks good. So then if I start moving these, it's now a lot more precise about which bits move. So very useful when you want to rig non-human creatures, and you want that cartoony style where you want to squash and shred stuff. So at this point we should probably save. So I'll just put it in here. We'll do letter I tutorial, and you can name it whatever you want. So we have our mesh, we have our lattice. So now we can actually start rigging. I would suggest we probably clear the parent of this for now, so we don't have this modifier on. So that means they're not bound. So we'll first go and armature and do single bone. So this bone here will be our root bone. So make sure our transform origin is 3D cursor. We'll move this down and we'll rotate this -90 degrees. So this root bone will basically control all the bones in your rig. And this is for almost every rig you will have a root bone. So this is ours right here. So then we'll create a base bone. So I'll extrude this up. We'll name this one base. And to extrude, I'm literally just pressing E, like you do the mesh. So we'll go here, and in relations, make sure the parent of the base bone is the root bone. So if we go into pose mode, we can see that the root bone controls the base bone, but the base bone still moves on its own, which is what we want. So once we've done our root bone and our base bone, we'll go up here, and just like our... Okay, as you can see here, right, we have, I forgot to do this at the right time, but we want a single line down the middle for a lattice, so just so it's easy to control things. So we'll just click one more. So even though it isn't square, it should be okay, but we want that nice lines. Like, I also have one across the center here. So these things we want just so it's easy to control the lattice. So, sorry about that. We'll select the top 3 center vertices, and we'll just do cursor to selected. And back in our bone edit mode, we'll do Shift A and move this bone down. This bone is going to be our squash and stretch bone. So we'll just call this squash controller top. Or actually we'll just call it squash controller. There we go. So basically when we move that bone up and down, it will squash and stretch the the lattice which squash and stretches the mesh. So to do the squash and stretch, we'll select down here the root, and we'll select up here the base of the squash control, and we'll just press F to fill. And this bone here we will call squash. We want its parent. Right now we'll leave its parent to base, but we will change this later on. Which actually we'll just change it now. You'll need to create a new bone, because what happens is we're going to want to be able to squash and stretch from the top, but we also want to squash and stretch from the bottom. So like right now the controller is only for the top, but we also want to be able to move the bottom up to the top. So we're going to be using another bone, which I'll put here, and just call this squash base, and set its parent to base. And I think, oh yeah, and for the big, squash bone, we'll set up the base to squash base. So that kind of sets up the squash and stretch. Right now, if you go into pose mode, nothing happens because we haven't set up our constraints. So we'll go ahead and do that. So the squash base, or the squash bone will go to its constraints, and we'll add stretch 2. And basically stretch 2, whoops. Oh, where'd it go? Okay, stretch 2, there it is. Where is it? Stretch 2 says, depending on its base bone, where its parent is, kind of deform and like squash and stretch this bone to its target. So our target here is the squash control. So we'll go here and do armature and squash control. So now, if we move this, you'll see the bone will start doing all this kind of weird squashing and stretching and flattening and stuff. And that's good, that's what we want. And as you can see here, this is what a squash and stretch would look like from the top. And the reason why we added a base bone here is so that we can squash and stretch from the bottom. So it just gives us some more control. So, once you've done that, I'll quickly add some constraints to these, because you can see here, you don't really want to be able to squash and stretch like that. It just makes things difficult. I mean, it is useful, but we'll do this in a different way. So what we'll do is basically limit the X and Z location of the bone. So basically this bone can only go up and down. And we'll do the same with the squash base. We'll limit the X and Z. So now these two can only control how much squash and how much stretch there is. So once you've done that, we'll just save our file, because gotta be safe. Okay, so what happens next? Let me check my notes. Okay, next we need to do the IK chain. So what we'll do is select the squash bone, and we're going to duplicate it. And then we're going to press M to move to new layers and move it to the second layer. So to access the second layer, we'll go to Object Data Properties, and we'll select that layer there. So you can see the other bones have disappeared. They're not deleted, they're just on the first layer. And they'll still affect the mesh, or this rig. So if I do this, you see that this extra bone is still being affected. So we'll select this, and we'll basically delete the stretch 2 because we don't want this anymore. And we'll subdivide this, I'd say. You want to subdivide it to a point where, it's bad subdivision, where the intersection points are on the lattice, because this will help us with rigging or with applying the rig later. So you can see here, we probably need about 7 bones, so this will be good. You can see these aren't in line, so we'll have to edit the lattice again. And we'll just do this by increasing the number. So 17 looks like it works. Yeah. So then, oh look, it's square again. There we go, okay. So then we're going to create an extra bone. Let's extrude this up. And this bone will be called bend.ik. So if you don't know what inverse kinematics are, essentially with an arm, if you think about an arm, kind of if you want to rotate it, you'd rotate the shoulder first, and then you'd rotate the actual arm, and then you'd rotate the hand, and you do that in kind of like an order. With IKs, it's the other way around. Depending on where like your hand moves, the bone and the shoulder will move, kind of depending on that. So you'll kind of see this in play later when we actually set this up. But we'll want to rename all these bones. So just do bend and then start with 0 and just go up and increase the number each time. So bend 1, oops, bend 2, bend 3, bend 4, bend 5, all the way up. Bend 6, oops, and 7. So now, we have our bones named, and we have our bend IK. So we'll select the highest bone on the list, so bend 7, and we'll go to constraints, and we're going to add this inverse kinematics constraint, and we'll set our target to armature bend IK. So this chain length here is extremely important. What happens with chain length, remove this, oops, is chain length basically says how far down this inverse kinematics goes. So I could set all of these to be kind of affected by the location of this, or I could set like half of them or whatever. So we'll actually set 0 means everything, 1 is the actual bone, and then it keeps going. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We won't do 8 because we kind of want this base to stay at the base, because we don't want that to be kind of bent and stuff. So yeah, we'll leave it at 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And right now, this might happen to you, but I can't actually move this bone. And that's because this bone is parented to bend 7. So we can just disable the connected and get rid of the parent. And now, if we move it around, you can see that now it's starting to bend in these fun, kind of weird ways. And this will be helpful when we want to kind of give our character animation. So this is basically all it is, kind of simple IK chain. And there's an extra setting here, depending on how you want the IK chain to work, which is rotation. And you probably will end up, if you're animating, disabling and enabling this, because it gives you a different kind of bend, but also you can rotate the parent, like the control bone, and it will affect the rotation of the IK chain. So once you've done that, we need to kind of connect it all together. Because if we go over here, if we enable the other thing, and we find our squash control, you see that this IK chain doesn't get affected by the squash control. So to fix this, we go back to our second layer, and we set the parent of the IK chain, like the main bone, bend 0, to squash. So now, if we go back to both of them, when we squash our rig, you'll see that the IK chain also squashes. So then I can still do this kind of fun rotation magic and stuff, even though the thing is still squashed. So now, once you've done that, we want to do something. We want to add like these extra deformers, because if you see on the original rig, there were these kind of center balls that I could move, and that would kind of distort certain parts of the rig. So we'll kind of do that now. Go to our second layer, and depending on how many you want, you can have more, you can have less. I kind of did every other selection, so select every other kind of circle, and just extrude that out about here. And we'll have to rename these, and we'll set them to deform. Deform 0, deform 1, so on. So deform 0, deform 1, deform 2, deform 3, deform 4. You don't have to have these, but it's fun to have them, so that's why we're including them. But if you look, once again, we can't actually move these, and that's because they're still parented. What we'll do though is we still want this to be a child of these bones. We just want to be able to move it itself. So we won't clear the parent, but we'll uncheck this connected. So now this is still a child, but it can now move freely on its own. So we'll just do that for all of them. That one's already done. Okay. So now you see we can move all these, and when the IK chain moves, these bones will also, I'll change the IK real quick. These bones will also move depending on the IK chain, which is exactly what we want. So that's pretty much how you do those. Not too difficult. But before we kind of start applying it to the lattice, we should probably clean things up. So if we go back here, where is it? Here. Select both of them. It's really hard to see what's going on in these two, even with these kind of layers. It looks kind of boring. So we're gonna basically create groups, like color groups, so you understand where everything goes. And I like to have the first layer with all the controls and the second layer with like bone structure and stuff. So for all kind of like the bend bones, which are here. Ooh, wait a minute. Yeah, all the bend bones, I kind of leave them in the second layer, and all the control bones we put in the first layer. So go up here. This is another bend bone, so we'll put that there. And we will, I think that's everything we need. Yep. So the base bone rotates everything. Okay. So what we'll do is in the armature, we'll go to bone groups, and for now we'll select all of these, create a new group, set it to, I think, red, and we'll just name these controllers. And then I like to have two kinds of controllers and microcontrollers. So microcontrollers would be things like the stretching or the deforming. So we'll just select all the deform bones. It's a little tough to see. I will do it after this. So we'll just do microcontrollers. We'll set this to blue. We'll hide this bone so we can set this one. That. And that. So it just gives us a little more variation so we can see where things are. Make the IK higher. There we go. Okay. And then for the structure bones, we'll just do structure and set this color to green. So together it's kind of easier to see where things are, and it's still pretty. So then, oops. In the original rig, I think I had something else with the rotation with these bones. So I forgot how I did it though, so I'm going to quickly check this. So what we'll do is we'll go to our IK, which should be in the new layer now, and bend 7, and we'll enable rotation. Then we'll go back to our first bone. And you can see now if we rotate, it kind of only rotates the top parts. But there's also a way for us to rotate the bottom. So I think it's just, which bone's that? That's the squash base. Okay. Yeah, so that's fine. No worries. Probably cut that out, I don't know, we'll see. So once we have all our bones and stuff, we'll now need to start connecting it to the lattice. So if we go to lattice, you can see there's vertex groups here, and we'll need to create vertex groups for all the bends and all the deforms, but we'll start with bend. So we'll do bend 0, bend 1, bend 2, bend 3. It's probably a faster way of doing this, but I don't know. Bend 4, bend 5, oops. Bend 6, and bend 7. So we'll start at bend 0, and basically, wherever the bone is, you can kind of guess here, it's kind of 3 points. You just want to assign a weight of 1. So you'll see it changes colors just like in weight paint. So we'll do bend 0, go to bend 1, and we'll select these 3. Bend 2, we'll select these 3. And just, box selecting and then clicking assign. So bend 3, bend 4, all the way down, bend 5, oops, bend 6, and bend 7. And that's pretty much how you do most of the bending for the bend bones. We'll do the deform bones after we kind of connect things up. But if you move our rig now, like this, you'll see nothing really happened. The lattice is the exact same way, and that's because we haven't kind of parented it yet. So we'll select the lattice and the bones, and we'll do Control P and armature deform. So now when we move this bone, you'll see that now the lattice kind of deforms, and it kind of gives you this weird stuff here, but we'll fix it out soon. So to see how it actually affects our eye, we just disable that. We'll select our lattice, then our object. Never mind, we select our object and then our lattice, and we do lattice deform. So now you can see, well, hey, our text kind of bends and stuff. You can see down here it's kind of got this weird kind of low resolution stuff, and to solve that we can just go to modifiers for our object and do add modifier smooth and just turn that up to, I think 0.5 works pretty well. But you have to be a little bit careful. I think 0.3, 3 or 4. There you go. You can see here our text looks much smoother, and it still works pretty well when being deformed. See, this is where you might start playing with it because it's really satisfying. But if we play with our stretch, squash and stretch, you can see it squashes the eye and it keeps the deforms as well, which is nice. So once you've done that, we'll do these deform bones, because right now they don't do anything. So we go back to our lattice, go over here, we'll do deform.0, deform.1, deform.2, deform.3. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5. Deform.4 and deform.5. So we'll once again set our own weights for these. So deform.0 down here. We'll do 1 as kind of its center spot. I think, wait, let's find the other bone first. Deform 1. Yeah, so for this bone, 1 is its center spot, and then as it goes further out, we'll kind of decrease it. So 0.75, and then 0.5, and that's good enough. So we'll go to deform 1. You can see here, there it is. That's what it will look like for all these bones. So we'll do that, and then 0.75 will be on both sides this time. So here and here, and 0.5 goes out even more. And you can probably skip through this, but you basically go all the way up. So we'll do deform 2, which is here. And reason why I'm doing, it's like kind of making it go down each time, is that basically the strength will be the highest here, and it will slowly get weaker as it goes on, just so that it kind of fades from one control to another. So we go to bone 3. Did I miss a bone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, we don't need that one. Okay. No, okay. Oh, oops. There we go. Let's move that. Go here. 0.75. All the way up, like that. And the last deform here. Just like that. And just make sure, I need to make sure that the names are the same because I can't fully remember. This bone is bone 4. Okay, cool. So now if we try and move things, it deforms. So we can actually hide everything. And what you can do is you can move it around, you can scale it, which gives us this nice kind of inflation look. And all these bones kind of move around and do their own things, which is great because they still get affected by the IK. So you can do an IK and then you can kind of do that. and it still works. And then also you can squash and stretch. Here's the squash bone. You can squash and stretch the bone even while everything else is still like that. Now the smoothness is still bothering me. So if it bothers you too, you can add a subdivision to about 1 or 2, and that will kind of clear things up as well. Just like that. It will slow things down, but it cleans it up even more. But we'll just leave that off for now. So we'll go back to our mesh and just do that. So now that's pretty much most of doing the actual rigging. What we need to do now is, because moving bones around can be pretty boring. Like you want to be like a cool guy. You want to have all the cool controls. So what we'll do is, in the if you look in the link, if you look in the description, there's going to be a link that has kind of this blend file called bone widgets. So we can just go ahead and open that up. So I'm going to create a new blender. You might want to do this too. And we're going to go File, Open, and you'll just navigate towards where that was. So letter rigging, and you'll find bone widgets here. So I'll just put these side by side real quick, just like that. This one goes here. And what you can do is you can select all these. I've already named them for you, because just these nice names. And we'll do Control C in this blend file. It should say copied. We'll go over here and we'll just click paste. Okay, that didn't work. We need to be in object mode. And you click paste, and you'll see now they're in this blender file. So you can close this one. If you can't copy and paste, you might have to do some appending, but this worked fine for me. So you want to select these, and we'll move them into their own collection called letter I, or no, we'll just call them rig widgets. So these kind of, give some fun controls to make it easy to see what you're doing. So we can disable these for now. If you go to our bones, we'll just start going through and we'll, assign each bone to one of these shapes. So we'll go pose mode, we'll click on root, we'll scroll down and you'll find viewport display. You want to enable this wireframe option, and we'll go to custom object and just look for the letter base. Oh, wrong one, sorry. That should be letter root. There we go. And just so we can kind of, if you want to, you can scale it up. So I'll do like 1.5. And now it kind of, it gives you this look. So you can see here, even though we're moving the rig, these bones up at the top aren't moving. So I have to parent these. I forgot to do that, sorry. So then, we'll just go through. What bone is this? Deform. The deform bones, do the same. And you look for the sphere. And we can set these, you can set these to about 1.5 as well. So, sphere, 1.5. If you don't see anything there, you probably forgot to enable wireframe. So if you just check wireframe, it will pop up. So we'll go sphere, 0.5 wireframe, sphere, 1.5 wireframe. So you might have to change your rigs up a lot depending on the letter. You might have to do different deforms and stuff. You can see here this is working pretty well. Having trouble seeing them, you might have to scale them up even more, so I might do that. Just 2. There we go. Just like that. And then we'll find our base bone, which is here. And the base bone uses base. We'll scale this up to like 3. The squash and stretch we'll find here. And we'll check wireframe. We'll do squash. And you see this one is the wrong way around. Ooh, let's go even more. So we can just use the rotation, one of these. There we go. Just do the 90 degrees there. So now it looks like it's like an arrow for up and down. Do the same up here as well. Which bone is this? Yep, squash control. Ooh. It's a lot too big. And we'll rotate this 90 degrees too. And then for this bone, for the IK, we'll use the, which one is it called? Bend, yeah. And scale it up. And we'll just move this one up so you can see better. So then when we move this, it's just like easy controls, easy controls. So we need to go back and parent this, both of these to the root. So I think that worked. Now this one needs root. There you go. So now when we move the root, everything moves. But when we move the base, only certain stuff moves. And if you want to, you can parent this to the IK. I'll probably do that actually. But actually, no, I won't. But yeah, depending on how you want your rig to react, you can do your own things. But this is pretty much how the rig works, and that's pretty much everything. In the next tutorial, which is optional, you can set your own, like, you can set up the file, like I'm going to clean things up, and you can see how like a nice, like a workflow file would look. So if you want to, you can see that too.